I suspect that some of you may have questions for either Joe or Kevin. So we'd like to open the lines for anyone that does have a question. As I mentioned before, if you'd like to ask the question, please enter your question into the Q&A box and hit send, and we'll address as many of these as we have time for. Okay, we've got the first one that's come in here. I think this is for you, Joe. How have these projects impacted your team or changed the skill set you needed from your team to meet your business objectives?
Yeah, so that's a great question. Traditionally telecom has been viewed as site operational people, right? They exist in the halls and the hallways of hospitals, and they support that box with the lines that are plugged into it. That has changed and morphed into, I have almost 3 tiers of engineering now. So the highest level of engineer, they are certified in the Sonus boxes. They have some familiarity with all of our network team and architects. So that's much more of an architectural level. Probably not as many there because we've kind of simplified the management of it. That middle tier is our top level of engineer outside of an architect that can distribute, support, do large scale projects related to SIP, related to the PBX solution, right? Related to all things, the old standard telecommunications, VoIP engineering type roles. And then we still have, again, because we're mostly healthcare, if a hospital wants 30 changes in a day, I can't tell the hospital, well, you need to wait because I've got some windshield time and I'm going to send an engineer out. So that old traditional telecom on-site support role, you see that morphing into a help desk role, right? Where if I've got a problem at a desktop, that person can go there, take care of the phone problem, probably can take care of the PC problem, or something related to that. And then they'll still do some of the old tried and true telecom related tasks. So great question. It has not been easy, but we had to morph into that model. And again, in some ways, it works for us. It may not work for everyone, right? Just the same as we chose to buy and become self-supported because we own our data centers and we rely on our data centers. We're not a big cloud presence currently. That could change for other applications, but that model worked for us. For some of you, having more support from Coeo or more support from an operational perspective might be the right thing, and that could change the model as well. But for us, developing those engineering skill sets, along with the journey, Sonus, Ribbon, that was their old name, has been fantastic at allowing us to get certified. We channel that through Coeo. Obviously, that's our path to Ribbon, and some of them are not easy. I've had a few people that had to take them twice. In fact, I was messing with our network security team, because one of them had to do the network security part twice. But once they're there and the confidence is built, we have, Kevin and his team within Coeo to kind of lean on to help us even further, right? Because they're much more versed in that platform than we were. But we're there, and that's what the structure looks like today. So great question, very insightful.
The next question I think is also for you. The question is, what precautions did you take to ensure that your systems operated effectively while you were making all these changes?
Also a great question. So our CTO at the time said to me, this looks great, but it's kind of like the light switch. If as long as you flip it, it should turn on. People expect your phone lines to work. If this doesn't work, there's going to be all kinds of scrutiny. So make sure that what you're doing here, is going to be bulletproof, so that if somebody wants to be a naysayer or somebody says, well, why did you change it, right? You have a really good explanation of it. So we started small, right? So what you saw today, albeit, if we showed you the overall network, it would be even more. But we started small. We started with the 2 data centers in Illinois, and we started implementing location at a time. We paused. We took the time to learn and understand all kinds of different roadblocks that could stun a lot of people if you didn't do it right. So we started small. We looked at going to converting smaller sites that were closed, as opposed to, let's just onboard a hospital that's 24/7. We had effective project management and leadership, not only from the Coeo side, internal to them, our side, right, within Advocate, but we also had, support from our ribbon, and Sona's team, so that project management, while I might have had 3 different swim lanes of responsibilities, we were always in sync with one another and tackle those problems together. That, and I would say that especially in healthcare, whoever your change advocates are, right, whether you have a very robust change management process or not, use that communication team to your advantage. You cannot, I'd be remiss if I said that we were able to just kind of do it and nobody knew what was going on behind the scenes. Nowadays, you probably won't get away with that. We were able to get away with some of that. So incorporate change management and awareness to the leaders of the sites that you're going to touch, because it's going to help you immensely at being able to convey to them what you're doing. Those are probably some of the things I'd say to maybe plan for or kind of build into a model.
Thank you. The next one, and I apologize if you addressed this and I just missed it, but how long did it take to deploy these changes from the beginning until you felt like you had kind of finished this phase of your direction?
Yeah, so the initial phase for us was going to be implementing the data center model where we could centralize the routes, right, and centralize all of our trunking into the 2 cores, and then building the remote connections for our hospitals, and then bringing all those DIDs and PRIs over to SIP services. 3 years, right? Again, we deliberately chose to stagger, right, and not do you couldn't really do a flash cut, but there was porting involved, right? And as you all, I believe, are going to be aware, right, when you're porting in between carriers, that tends to kind of drive the time frame. So could we have done it faster? Probably, but end to end, 3 years for that first initial phase, which was really the lion's share of the work that we look to incorporate.
We've got a couple more here, and this next one, I think that's about the cost impact, which I think you mentioned in your comments that you had a pretty quick ROI and you exceeded your expectations by about 30%. The part of the question that I'll jump to the second part of the question that I don't think you did answer was, how did those ROI savings affect your budget going forward?
Yeah, so our overall spend operationally for telecommunication services in the state of Illinois, because that was the subset matter, right, in that first phase, was in excess of $14 million. All kinds of legacy services, all kinds of services that probably could have been pruned, et cetera. We're now operating at essentially 38% of that original spend. So it was absolutely impactful.
Yeah, significantly. Just one more here. You mentioned in your remarks that you use ribbon SBCs. What made you decide to use ribbon to accomplish this over other solutions that were available?
So we did test a number of different, I guess I'll take a step back. There were 4 different carriers that we had looked at to do SIP. You probably know all of them, right? Or they've changed names now because they might have merged with somebody else. And each of them kind of brought their own SBC solution. 2 out of the 4 used Sonos at the time, right, which is now Ribbon. And that was, to us, the best of breed box. It also integrated and had affiliations with our chosen PBX solution at the time. And it made it very easy knowing that when we did eventually chose choose Coeo as the winner of that bake-off and that RFI and RFP process, that they were also using ribbon. So they've been a great partner to buy from. Both Coeo, obviously that's where we buy our ribbon equipment today in licensing. So all those things factored into that.
We do have one more, and I promise you this will be the last one. This will be for Kevin. Kevin, what new technology or trends are we seeing organizations like Advocate focusing on now?
Yeah, first, and I'd just add a little bit to that last question there as well. For like from a Coeo perspective, we chose to build our network on ribbon for the same reasons, right? It's carrier grade. If you look at every carrier, not every carrier, but at the majority of the carriers in the world, right, are using ribbon technology in the core, right? So it's a carrier grade SBC solution, and for a large enterprise such as Advocate, the 5K models are, they're what we're deploying in our carrier network. So those just make sense, right? And so whatever carrier you're connecting to, the odds are they have a ribbon / Sonos core. And so it just makes sense to put that at the edge. And that's why we chose to move all of our devices to the edge, because we realized that some of our customers are also going to have, different ISP trunk groups coming in. And if they want to be successful across those implementations, having a ribbon SBC at the edge is going to provide that interoperability checkbox that Joe was talking about. As far as new technologies, right, I really see a strong push towards high availability voice. And for a lot of large enterprises, that's being accomplished with our SD-WAN solution, right? So we're seeing a big push into the SD-WAN technologies for security and for this high availability voice, where we can, and just to go into a quick example, right? We have a bank that has 2 ISPs. They have a connection from Coeo and they have a connection from like maybe Comcast, and they have an SBC sitting behind that. If the circuit from Coeo were to go down, somebody hits a telephone pole, circuit goes down, those calls would normally have to be re-originated, and that's normal and that's easy to do. But what they wanted to do, if contact centers, or if you're on for a bank or for a any kind of contact center solutions, you want to keep that call active. You don't want the user to have to call back. So we put in an SD-WAN model in between, and it floats the IP across both ISPs. And therefore, if a link goes down or if we're seeing jitter, latency, anything like that, we can preference the other circuit and the packets get down to the SBC, voice path stays up. Nobody knows it went down except all of the internal folks that are monitoring the network, and they go fix it. So we have the double redundancies. And I think that's really an exploding market for, a lot smaller enterprises that can't afford to buy redundant circuits to all the data centers, such as like an Advocate. So I think that's probably the biggest growing technology from a voice perspective, and even just in general network and services perspective.
Thank you. I don't believe we have any further questions, so I think we'll wrap this up. If you didn't get a chance to ask a question, or you think of one after we conclude the webinar, please feel free to email me your question, and I'll make sure we get you an answer. If it's a more complex question and specific to Advocate, Joe has been kind enough to offer to just jump on a phone call with us and answer any specific questions you have or any information that you need. And again, you can coordinate this through me. My email address is jrushin, and again, that's jrushin@coeosolutions.com. Also, for those of you who will be attending the HIMSS conference in Chicago next week, we'll be presenting some of our broader capabilities in the exhibition hall. We'll be in booth 4370. Please stop by and say hello and see some of the interesting things we're doing for customers. Finally, I'd like to thank Joe and Kevin for sharing some examples of how Advocate is using telephony to meet the evolving business needs of their organization. It was a great presentation. Thanks again for everyone's participation, and have a great day.
Thanks, guys.